What is going on, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of The Rose Show. As always, I am your host, Jay. Who else but me? And today, man, my homie Jared Savage is here with me with another edition of the Unmasked Series. I love doing these Unmasked Series. I'll keep doing them as long as I can find anybody who's interested in doing them. Man, they're so much fun because you get a chance to see the person behind whatever the gimmick is. And man, I've wholeheartedly believe that you can't judge people based on their gimmicks. And I know that might be, kind of a duh moment for some people, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people judge the gimmick and not the person. And that's where the problem comes into play, I think. So that's why I prefer doing these Unmasked series, because we get to see the real people behind, these creative ideas that people love so much. And you really get to see what kind of people they are. So this one is going to be no different, as you'll see here in a minute. So since we last recorded, the country decided to try to kill us again here in Ohio. Last week there was another round of bad storms, although this one wasn't nearly as bad as the one a couple weeks ago. But man, I know this is all being caused by El Nino. I don't know what the fuck El Nino is. I know it's a storm system that obviously comes up from some Spanish place. I don't know, but El Nino need to El fucking go, yo, because I'm over this shit. For sure. By this time, hopefully you didn't waste your money on the eclipse. I don't know what the outcome was, but the weather report as of this recording is saying that Monday is going to be cloudy, and there's going to be a lot of people who spent a lot of money to come out here for no reason, because for some reason, here in Sydney, Ohio, this area anyway, Sydney, Pickwood, Troy, apparently we're getting hit the hardest with this eclipse. And like I said, the weather's supposed to be bad. So if the weather sucked and you spent all this money to come out here, that's what you get. Anyway, so enough shit talking. Let's go ahead and get to my sponsor, and then we're going to get into the next edition of the Unmasked series featuring my friend Jared Savage. Let's go. All right, everybody, it's time to stop and let you know about today's sponsor of the show, Crazy Martin's in Pickwood, Ohio, one of my favorite places in the entire world to go to. Crazy Martin's has provided their customers with quality products for over 20 years, from ashtrays to water pipes and everything in between. Stop in, check out their selection, and of course, check out their pinball machines. With over 20 pins to choose from, there is something for everyone. Crazy since 1996. I don't just say this about every place. I love going to Crazy Martin's. I've always loved going to Crazy Martin's ever since I was of age to go to Crazy Martin's. It's one of my favorite places in the entire world. Me and my wife go there almost every Sunday to play pinball machines. It is one of the funnest spots in Ohio you could possibly find. It is in Pickwood, Ohio. Check out their website at www.crazymartins.com. Hello, everybody. What's going on? It is another episode of The Rose Show. As always, I am your host, Jay. Who else but me? And today, I got one of my favorite people that I've met in music here with me today. He's a man of many talents. He's hosted many Zool shows with his wide range of impersonations that he does. He's wrestled all over the country. He'll collect your face, then do an impersonation of Paul Bearer for you. It's my homie, Jared Savage, my dog. How are we doing this evening?
I'm fucking great, dude. I've been excited for this since the day you were like, yo, man, you want to be on here. So I'm fucking stoked right now.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get back to the beginning, because I feel like, as most people that I bring on to the show for the first time, I feel like a lot of people, well, I know a lot of people know you, but I don't think too many people know who you are. I know a lot of people behind the scenes has gotten to know Jared Savage, the person behind the mask, which is why we are doing the Unmasked series here today. But there's a whole layer to you as a person. So let's go ahead and just start back at the beginning, the backstory of, kind of your upbringing and what got you into wrestling.
Well, so as far as, my upbringing and everything, Had a, I guess, an interesting life because lived with my grandparents. I mean, I know there's a lot of people, who get raised that way, but it's not exactly what's considered the normal or ideal, situation. But because of that, my grandpa always watched wrestling. My grandma did too, but it was mostly my grandpa who really gave a shit about it. I mean, it was there like literally since the beginning. Like, there's no memories that I have where wrestling wasn't around.
Right.
It was always there. So I just grew up with it being just a part of my life, and I always watched it. And I knew honestly since like the beginning that I wanted to be a wrestler. Like, I had like other little fucking things that I came up with, like, I don't know. I remember that Disney movie Johnny Tsunami came out, and I was like, "Oh, I want to be a surfer." Or fucking, the Tony Hawk craze hit, and I was like, "I want to be a skateboarder." But no matter like whatever, you know, thing that kind of sidetracked me for a second to think, "Oh, this might be what I want to do." I always still knew that I wanted to ultimately be a wrestler because I don't know, man. Wrestling's larger than life. That was my superheroes. I wasn't really I didn't really fuck with comics or, you know, like any superhero shit. My superheroes were wrestlers. So,
What year are we talking about here? Like what time frame when you were watching with your grandparents? Like what year?
I mean, I was born in 94. So,
Okay.
I mean, we're talking like probably like at least early memories, the new generation era for sure.
Okay.
Because I can
So
clearly remember Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart and the red, white, and blue ropes and Vader and Taker.
right,
Like,
the Luger era basically.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We know what you kind of present yourself as now, but when you were growing up watching, who were some of your favorites? Did you gravitate towards more like the horror characters? Like you're obviously your Undertaker. I guess back then it would be kind of the tail end of, the Kamalas and Giant Gonzalez's, just the over the top horror like characters, or were you like me where you were a Hulkamaniac through and through?
It was always like, I guess what I would say more of the horror characters, like Undertaker, as long as I can remember. Um, I liked Shawn Michaels a lot and Bret Hart too as a kid. I mean, I don't know if I had the same connection with them, but I always liked them. But it was like always Undertaker, and then when Kane fucking debuted, that was a big change because as soon as Kane showed up, Kane was my favorite wrestler, like
Oh
instantly.
yeah.
And he remained my favorite wrestler for most of my life, which he's still one of my favorites. I mean, over time, your interest and shit, you do gravitate towards other people, but Kane and Undertaker have always been a solid. Also, I always liked, I guess, the tall, big wrestlers because, at that time he was in WCW as the Giant, but Big Show was another one that I liked. I liked Kevin Nash for that reason. Um, that was always like the like just from like my early memories, that was always the people who stood out. But also there was two like Vader. Vader was another one of my favorites, and he's always stuck as one of my favorites as well. I mean, I think I get a lot of inspiration, to be honest, still from Vader because
Yeah.
he is one of the best big men. Like, I mean, there's plenty of other big men who are just as dope, but Vader had something special.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, he was, a double tough motherfucker, is the way that they always put it. And going back and actually doing some research on him, man, wish you could have gotten that side out of him. Could you imagine if when he got to the WWF, he hadn't got his ass kicked and he still had that attitude and fire in him and Kane in his prime would have had a rivalry together? How incredible would that have been?
Oh, I think it would have been great because don't get me wrong, the little feud that they had, like, it was cool for what it was, but Vader ultimately got made to look like a bitch during that. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember the promo after his match with Kane when he lost, and he said something like, "I'm nothing but a big piece of shit." Like, I
Yeah.
remember that, and it's like that's not the Vader. that WCW portrayed. That's not the monster, the mastodon, the guy who was sitting there power bombing everybody and squashing the jobbers and ultimately hurting a lot of them too.
Yeah.
It was such a different contrast, and I do think that if he would have been that version of himself going up against like Kane or whoever, I definitely think it would have been a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that one. So, okay, you always wanted to be a wrestler. Wrestling was always a part of your blood, so you said. How did underground music come to be a part of that package and presentation of your personality?
So it's funny with that too, because even though I didn't realize it for a long time, ICP had kind of always been around, like because of wrestling. I remember as a kid, and it's still funny when I think about it. When I was little, I would literally say, "Insane Clown Posse sucks," and I think it was because I truly think it was because they were heels in WCW. I think that's 100% why I thought that. Um, but it was 2000, it had to be 2004. Yeah. So somewhere, whenever the Backyard Wrestling game dropped, I saw the commercial on TV for it, and I instantly recognized Violent J. I didn't know him by name, but I was like, "That's the Insane Clown Posse guy." And it's funny because, like I said before that, I was on the whole "they suck" thing, but I saw him in there, and I was like, "I want that game." And it wasn't. I mean, I wanted it obviously too because it was wrestling. Like I've always been obsessed with wrestling, so that was always the agenda too. But for some reason, I don't know why that stuck out to me. And so when I did finally get the game, it was my 10th birthday. Instantly, I remember turning it on, and the intro's homies, and you get on the game, and you've got chicken hunting, hocus pocus, down with the clown, blam. Well, you got a good
Such an
little mix.
underrated game, man. God, that
Oh,
was such a good
absolutely.
game.
It's still one that like I still play. Like I don't know, it was probably about a couple weeks ago that I was sitting there going back and forth between that and the second one. But yeah, Backyard Wrestling, the game was where it all started. And actually, when I went and did a meet and greet during the Missing Link era, like I think that was actually the last meet and greet tour they did. But I brought my copy of Backyard Wrestling to get signed by them just because that was the beginning. Without that, I wouldn't be here. So that's how I originally started was through finding ICP music wise through that game. And also something that really made me gravitate so much was in the you got in the game, you've got all those little clip videos, the little music videos of you got the
Right.
backyarders, but you also got JCW footage. And when I found out that they had their own wrestling company, I was hooked. I was like, holy shit, they've got a wrestling company. And the fact that it was, s- I mean, they had a lot of top talent, dude. I mean, if you look at JCW history from the beginning, they've had so many names roll through there. So it was like, holy shit, this is actually quality wrestling and it's meant for their fan base. That really stood out to me. And not to mention, too, like, even though I don't know if I would ever like do it. The deathmatch stuff definitely stood out because I was always one of those kids who loved the fucking hardcore shit. And seeing all the deathmatch shit on top of everything else was it just kind of sealed the deal that I was like, all right, I really like this. And that's how it all started. I mean, that's how I found Twisted. The second game is how I found ABK and how I found about Lotus. Um, it all stemmed from those 2 games.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those games that I don't really care how bad the gameplay is, and especially these days, it's not that good. I mean, the gameplay was a little bit choppy even back then. I mean, because it was a low quality production, but they got the most out of it. So even though, the gameplay sucked, at least I didn't like it, I still loved everything about it. And like you said, I was fully immersed into the scene by this point. So the fact that they were there was just an added bonus for me. But God, those two games are so good. One of the few that I wish somehow we could get a remaster, but I know is never ever going to happen. They're never going to take their time to remaster that at Xbox or Sony. It's not going to happen. So, okay, you're fully submersed into wrestling and music. How did you finally decide, okay, I'm going to go into the wrestling business. I want to learn, I want to train, I want to be a part of this. At what point did you pull that trigger and how did you get that process going?
So, like I said, I always wanted to do it. That was always the goal. How it actually came about was pretty wild. And the Juggalo world actually has a big part in it as well. So back in the day, when I like when I first got in, okay, to being a Juggalo, I this is before I had internet. I had to, buy CDs to find out more stuff. And I just found out about shit as I would look through the booklets. And like I said, because of the games, adding other people to their soundtracks, that was another way I found out stuff. So I remember I got the internet finally, I was 13. And I remember there was a chick I met on there. Her name it was on a it's funny looking back. It's on a game called RuneScape, a free game on the internet. Never really played it, but I always got on it because I could talk to people in the chat.
Yeah.
And I would always do this little dumb shit where I'd be like, press 1 2 3 into like type that into the chat if you're a juggalo, and she popped up. And come to find out, which I'll give her props. Her name is DT. Um, so I remember finding out she lived actually really close to me. She only lived like 45 minutes away. So she was an OG juggalo. She was super in depth with everything. She knew a lot of juggalos in the area, a lot of the old Tacoma juggalos, which back in the day, man, the Tacoma juggalo scene was the shit. But anyway, she knew a guy. His name was Claudio, and I'll go on here and shoot because I don't give a shit. Dude definitely like lied his ass off. Like lied his ass off from the beginning. He'd be telling me crazy stories about going. He's like, yeah, Dixie Carter, she had me come out to Alaska to a TNA house show. And she had me work. And I was, young, so I just ate it up. I was like, oh shit, for real? This is crazy. I'm talking to a wrestler. Well, come to find out, he wasn't as much of a wrestler as he said. He was more of he had like two matches. He had two battle royals. He wasn't a wrestler. He just, got in a ring a couple times. But we hadn't talked maybe, I don't know, a good couple months. And he hit me up all of a sudden. He was like, hey, there's a free wrestling show. So I went to the show, and I had been to one indie show before that, but that was when I was in Illinois because I'm originally from Illinois, moved to Washington. So I went to, the show in Illinois was the shit, but this was my first real, I don't know. There's something different about this show that just I don't know why it made it so much different. I guess because I knew him. But I remember seeing my trainer on that show, and I don't know. It was a weird thing too, man, because it felt like life was kind of giving me signs. Because at the time I was supposed to boo him and talk shit because he was a juggalo, but he didn't do a juggalo gimmick. And that dude who was refing wanted me to fuck with him a little bit, So I remember that being my first interaction with my trainer. And then I saw him, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later. I saw him at a Subway, and I recognized him, and I marked out because once again, wrestlers being around him, it didn't matter what scale, it was like, oh my God, it's a wrestler. So fast forward maybe another, I don't know, 5 6 months. Had this homie that I knew from a chat room. He ended up coming up and moving up and just living with my grandparents and me for a little bit. And he said for some reason, he was like, I want to get into wrestling. I want to try to be a wrestler. And looking back, I don't even think he really wanted to do it. I think he just wanted to do it because he knew I wanted to. And he was kind of trying to help me. So hit up, was hitting up people online, not getting messages back because this is MySpace days. But I ended up hitting up my trainer, JD Mason, and I told him like, "Hey, man, I need a contact info." So he ended up telling me he's like, "Well, I'll train you," which I definitely wanted to at the time, but I thought I was too young. I mean, this is when I was like getting ready to be 14 at this point.
Jeez.
So we went to a Burger King, sat down and talked to him. Uh, I don't know. He could just instantly tell like I was the one who was more eager and I really wanted to do this. And at first he was like, "Oh, well, you're gonna have to wait till you're at least 16." Somehow, I don't know. Somehow it ended up changing to, well, fuck it. He'll give me the chance. So he tells me what it's gonna be, $1,000. Um, I think it was just supposed to be like $1,000 for a year. I think that was really all it's supposed to be. But regardless, he laid out everything. I went back in the car where my grandma was, and I'm sitting there begging the shit out of him. I'm like, oh my God, I can wrestle. He's going to train me, blah, blah, blah. And at first, I mean, they knew I wanted to wrestle, but they were a little reluctant at first. But me begging enough, they're finally like, okay, then we'll do it. So they came up with a payment plan with them. And my early beginnings of training was different than what most people do. I mean, most people go to a school with a ring. I learned how to lock up, how to do arm wrenches, like all the little basics without bumping. I learned all of that literally in my front yard, like without a ring or anything. And eventually, it's still funny looking back because I don't know how the hell we even pulled it off, but somehow we talked my grandparents into paying to get a ring base built. It was made with backyard plans off the internet. So this is a very crude like setup ring. So it's
Right.
it's about 2 layers of tires, and then you've got a floating base made out of plywood and 2x4s and carpet padding. That is what I learned to bump on. And I spent God knows how many hours just being out there with my trainer. Like the homie who started with me, he ended up moving back because he was from Texas. He ended up dipping out not long after, but I stuck with it. And like I said, just years of having training matches. I didn't end up actually getting into an actual ring to have my first match until I was 18. So that was probably a good 4, almost 5 year span of, of just training. Um,
What were some of your biggest challenges while you were training?
Being comfortable. I remember one of the first things was just learning how to bump. I couldn't get it down at first. It took actually a while. I was afraid of like taking stuff too. Like I got dropped on my head one time taking a suplex. So I was like, oh God. One hurdle, I have asthma. So back then the asthma affected me a lot more than it does now. So that was definitely another thing that was rough. And also he didn't take me around, like he didn't really take me to shows and have me meet people because really he was still pretty young into the business. He was about, I think he had been working for about 4 years at that point. And like nowadays you got motherfuckers who will start training people when they've only been in a year or two. And no one says shit. But back then it was a lot different. You'd get a lot of heat for stuff like that. So it was always under wraps. So I didn't meet a lot of people at first. I was just kind of always in the background, and that kind of sucked. But he took a lot of time with me. And even though there was still little hurdles, I jumped over every one of them. Um, but I don't think there was really anything else that was really that bad as far as like trying to get past. It was just like said the comfortability and learning how to work. I don't think I
Do you
understood
remember?
psychology as well back then, but like I
Right.
said, it
Do
was
you
repetition.
do you remember what your first match was, or who it was against, and what were you happy with the outcome?
So my first match was on a training show. Um, my first match was actually with my trainer. Overall, I was all right with the outcome. It wasn't like looking back, oh man, that's dog shit. But at the time, it felt okay. It felt solid. There was a couple fuck ups. Like I remember I was wearing baggy shirts and sweatpants. So remember he ended up giving me like a kick to the gut and got his foot caught in my shirt and shit. It was, of course you have to have some kind of botch in your first match. But that was like my first, I mean, like I said, it was a training show, so you can consider it what it was. But
Right.
my first like real match on a show, probably about 6, 7 months later, when he started up Northwest Pro, wrestled a guy named Kendall Jackson, and that's definitely nothing to write home about. But it was the way I got my start. I mean, I wrestled in front of barely anyone that first time. The training show, that didn't have as many people either, but it felt like there was more people because they were loud. It was actually all the juggalos that I knew from the Bremerton area. We loaded them up in a van and just drove everyone out. And they were, I mean, man, the energy they had was wild because they were chanting stupid shit throughout the night. Like they just started a random Bradshaw chant. I remember that. Just even though it wasn't special, it was still special to me. So that was like my real like early beginnings of actually working shows. And like I said, I was 18 at that point, so I had a
Yeah.
good few years of experience training wise under my belt by that point.
Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying too, because I have this conversation with people sometimes, and I don't think they fully understand it. And I tell them that I have, and it's true, I'm not exaggerating. I've literally played in front of thousands of people, but the shows I remember were the ones with 60. The reason being is because the energy in a smaller crowd is almost always more intense than the energy in a bigger one. And every once in a while you'll get that perfect combination of a large crowd and that energy is there. But when you have that smaller crowd, it feels more intimate and people act accordingly. And yeah, I totally get that. So, at what point did you realize that you were good at another talent that I think, well, I don't think, I severely enjoy watching you do? You're a pretty damn good impressionist yourself, bro. And the very first time I met you, I never saw you in gimmick as far as the Jared Savage gimmick. I saw you as, I think, what was it? It was the very first Camp Zool, and you've done so many. Okay, I'll go ahead and let you explain it. Which two did you do at the very first Camp Zool, and then get back to how you figured out how you knew you could do these impressions?
So the first camp, I was Macho Man the first night, and then I was Hogan the next. Hollywood.
Hogan, that was it. Yeah, that's right. Because I coincidentally wore a Hollywood Hogan shirt that same night. I remember that now.
Yeah, that was fucking awesome. I remember that. I marked out for that because I was like, "Holy shit, dude! Did he know?" Yeah,
Right.
that was actually really cool. But yeah, that was those are the first two that I did publicly like that. As far as like how I got into doing the impressions, so all the juggalos that I knew up in Bremerton, they all did Macho Man impressions. Every one of them for some reason did it. And not everyone was good too. Like some of them were just shitty. But it was just a thing within the homies. And I always liked Macho Man. I could always do the ooh yeah, with the Macho Man voice even since I was little. So I don't know. I just started doing it, and eventually I got really good at it. I got like even better than what the homies before me did, which was cool. Um, that's how like it started, was just doing that, and then the Hogan impression that just kind of came on. Eventually, I just started trying to do it, and that took a minute to perfect. Like the original one I ever did was Austin, which it sucks because I can't do Austin anymore. I've tried, but I
Oh,
can't. I can't sound like I did when I was younger. But it was always just fucking around doing it with homies, and then started coming around and hanging out with Zool. I would just be me. I would just do my shit, and I would do the Macho Man impressions. And Bill heard it, and he was like, "Yo, you should really, you should really do something with this." And then they asked me if I wanted to do camp with it, and absolutely, I was gonna do that. Like that was a no brainer. I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm gonna do that." Nervous as shit
yeah.
doing it the first time like that, but I
Oh, I
I
could
was
tell.
oh yeah, dude, because I never. I mean, as much as I had been in wrestling rings, I had never been on a stage like that, like especially in front of that many people at an event that felt very monumental, especially being the first one. There was a lot of pressure there. I wanted to be on point, so that was a very humbling experience to be able to do that for the first time in front of everybody. And just
How
ever
did you
since, I mean, it's just eventually, grew to more. Like how this last year, um, we did the Undertaker the one night, and did RuPaul Bear the next, or even like Nodix doing the Mankind one. Like I just love doing them. It's fun.
how did you get hooked up with the AXE crew?
So I was I want to say this was about 2015 when I first heard them. I remember, like I said, I've always been a juggalo, but there came a point where I don't know. It was before all the beef shit, but I was starting to get to a point where just psychopathic and M&E alone wasn't really enough. I needed more. So I started diving deeper into the underground. So one of my first like homies I ever like made in the underground that was like actually doing music was my homie Concrete. And Concrete, he used to be on SKR way back in the day, like during the heyday. So he was like my introduction to like real horrorcore. And through him, I eventually found Dark Half, and I found LSP. And I don't know, around that time, I started fucking with Diabolic because Diabolic was on LSP. I really liked the album he did with Smalls One at the time, Dead Days. That's how like I found him, and I was super feeling it. And I started seeing pictures of the boys pop up on Facebook. I started seeing the Forever face. That I mean, it wasn't the very first one, but it was the 1.0. Um, at first when I saw it, I was like, "They're wearing Leatherface mask," and I don't know, I was still a little hesitant to give it a shot, and then I saw that Diabolic did the trunk with them, so I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna give it a listen," and instantly I was like, "Yo, those other dudes on here are something special." So I don't know. I started taking this deep dive into Zool, which wasn't really very deep at the time because you only had Head of Horns and you had Psycho. 'Cause Psycho just came out. So I don't know. I want to say a couple months later, I made the decision that I'm going to go to the Gathering, which I will say too. When I first found them, the vibes I got, I mean, I got the same feeling I felt with ICP, which was something that really stood out. So when I decided that I was going to go to my first gathering, it was Wizard of the Hood 2016. I saw LSP wasn't going to be there, and I was fucking with them heavy, and that was like, oh man, well that sucks because they were there the year before, and I just kept looking at like the lineup, and I saw all of a sudden there's AXE. Instantly, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to see them. I want to fuck with them, and I even told myself too, I was like, well, I'm gonna buy because that was when the first run of Forever Faces dropped. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna buy one before I go. Didn't get the money to do it, but I was so like dedicated and invested from the get go. So I remember that literally the first night pulling up to Legend Valley. It was the parking lot party the night before. The first thing I saw pulling in was a dude in a Forever Face, and I instantly like went to him and I was like, "Where's Zool?" And he pointed. He just pointed. It was up a row of like of cars. Walked up and I couldn't see shit. By the way, it's dark as fuck. But I could it could make out people, but just couldn't see any faces and shit. Walk up though, and I was like, I'm looking for Zool, and Bill comes out instantly. Just start chopping it up with him, and I was like, yeah, my name's Jared, and he's like, oh, you're the wrestler, right? Which blew me away because I was just like, you know who I am? Um, Instantly, just right away, everything clicked. Me and Bill talked for I don't know, probably like a good hour before he ended up dipping back to the hotel and shit. But I bought my first Forever Face off of him. I only had $100 at this point in my pocket, and he was like, $50, you can get this. I was like, well, fuck yeah, fuck eating. I'm not too worried about surviving. I'm worried about having Forever Face. So instantly, so I snatched up the opportunity and I wore that motherfucker the whole gathering through all the heat. Like I wore the fuck out of that mask. Um, but like that first night, chopping up with him, there was also other homies who were like Portsmouth homies who were around there. Chopped it up with all of them. Um, I remember also during that I met SON as well. Um, like very brief. Also met, and I want to definitely give him props. The homie Dylan Ziegler, one of the OGs, met him as well. Just met like all these people that I didn't know that I was going to have such a connection with. But the next day, gathering starts. It's the UPS set to start everything off, and the boys were on that. Went and saw that set, and then right after, directly after, I'm going to the med tent. So I'm feeling like shit. Never been in heat like that. And going down this big steep hill with flip flops on, ended up fucking slipping, twisted my ankle, broke it. So,
Mm.
so, most people, I'm sure they would have called it quits. They would be like, I'm going home. Nope, fuck no. I was there for Zool and I was not leaving. So I went to the hospital, did everything I had to do. They put a splint on me. It wasn't, it was very, like, I didn't even get like a real like cast till maybe a couple days later. But I came back and like the next night, like I had posted on Facebook about, the whole thing. Remember Joe commented like, "Oh man, we got to smoke together then. Whenever I see you." So just seeing the love that they were giving me, knowing what happened, I was like, "Whoa, man, these guys they're really cool." Next night, Wizard of the Hood happens, and they're right after. They're maybe like an hour after that at the Pendulum stage. Right? I think that's what it was called. Either way, it was the tent in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, I'm
So
pretty sure that was the pendulum one because I was at the gathering you're talking about. Oh man, that one gives me feels. That was I because I was there. Everything you're
Yeah.
saying right now, I'm reliving as you're talking about it. It was fucking hot. I remember day 4, right before main stage was about to start. Luckily, we were camped right next to somebody who had a trailer with AC in it because I overheated as well. It was fucking ungodly hot at that
Yeah.
point in time, and it was, yeah. I remember that gathering very clearly. A, because it was one of the best times of my life, but B, the heat was unreal.
No, it absolutely was. And that's why, like I said, that's why I was having that med tank because I was basically having a heat stroke. But I never
Yeah.
dealt with that. Like when you're in Washington, humidity's way different. So coming out to Ohio, it was like,
Right.
holy shit, I don't know. Like I didn't know what I got myself into. But like I
Right.
said,
Yeah.
like I said, I ended up having all that shit happen, watched their set. And I remember one big thing about that set that meant a lot to me was because this was the Blunts and Brews set. So
Yep.
they're passing out blunts, they're throwing, beers at people. I remember I was right there in the front with my broken ankle and all. Had my cast, my well, not my cast, but my little splint thing. Had my crutches. I am right there in the front, and I got a lot of love that night. Just a whole gathering from them. I was getting love because that was back too when CJ was in the group,
Yeah.
and I
CJ
remember.
Dye. Yep.
Yep, I remember he stopped on the golf cart, and he's like, "Yo, Forever Face, yo, I'm in Zool," and he was real just cool to me. Everybody just kept giving me love. So that first set was insanely special to me. I mean, the energy it had, like just seeing Wizard of the Hood right before that, which for a lot of people is their favorite set of the whole year. Don't get me wrong, it was an incredible set, but the energy was different and it was so much more intense with Zool. Something just
Yeah.
hit completely different.
And
And
what's wild is I was right up front, right there with you. So we had no
that's
idea
fucking
that we
crazy,
were.
bro. That's
Yeah.
crazy to think.
They. It's funny because up until the day CJ left the group, he would always talk about how, and it was true, there was one person passing out beers and weed, and they just kept hitting me and my homie Dirtbag, who was with me watching that, over and over and over, blunt after blunt after blunt after
Yep.
beer after beer after beer. Dude, I was annihilated at the end of their set, dude.
Yeah, I remember like literally because at first, if you remember, th- at first they're just passing out the blunts, and then
Right,
eventually
yeah,
they start throwing them. But like they were handing me a bunch of blunts, and like handfuls of them. And
yeah,
I remember SON was one of the people doing it. But they would always just come up to me. It felt like they just kept coming up to me directly, like here, here, here. So I would, disperse it to anybody else who was, standing around me because I'm not gonna hog all the shit. I remember too, a beer hit me right in the fucking forehead, but I didn't give a shit. I didn't care because I was like, "Fuck it, dude, I'm here. This is great. Hit me with as many beers as you want." But yeah, I remember watching the set. I remember I don't know who it was. It could have been CJ. Someone came up though and handed me the microphone during like one of the songs, and that was fucking like said, man. All of it was just so wild to me because I wasn't used to love like that. And then right after the set's over, I ended up just sitting there chilling and ended up, kicking it with Bill and Joe. And I remember too, I was thinking, I was like, these guys really want to hang out with me? Like I was such a different person then, so insecure and so surprised by everything. But yeah, I went and just kicked it with them. To be honest, I missed my only chance to ever see Dark Lotus, to spend time with them. And I've had homies give me shit for that. They're like, "Oh man, you missed Lotus." But to me it didn't matter because I was forming a connection with Zool. And that's how it all really started. That was the beginning. And then every year I would come back for him. And I remember too, between all that, I asked Bill, I was like, "Hey, can I do the, can I, could I start wearing the forever face, out to the ring? And I want to be the Northwest Zooligan because I wanted to be a billboard for him, being a walking billboard. And that was my way of street teaming. Bill gave me the permission right away. And yeah, every year I was coming back to the gathering for them. So like I came back to OKC where we had like an actual just campsite called Camp Zool. I remember that whole gathering. I mean, I even that gathering I ended up almost having a chance to get my foot in the door with JCW. And I turned it down because I wanted to be with Zool. I knew that they were going to perform that night and I wasn't going to miss it. I was like, nah, man, I'm here for them. I was also a little fucked up, so that was another reason I didn't do it because it wouldn't have been professional to be around, wrestling when you're
Right.
fucked up. But
Yeah.
after that, maybe like a month or two later after OKC, started hanging out on Xbox. Bill would be there. Joe would sometimes be around, but kind of in and out. But Joe would be there. My homie Dilly would be there. Um, a lot of artists, to be honest, were hanging out in the parties. And that's just how eventually I just started getting closer and closer, just talking every day to them and just being around. And then eventually, got to the point where I was like, man, these are actually my real homies. And, I guess the rest is just kind of history from there.
Okay. Well, as we wind down here, throughout your career, is there any particular matches, just off the top of your head, one or two, where they stick out to you more than the rest?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a small handful. Um, One of the first ones had a match with a guy named Chuck Payne. Uh, it was my first time. Oh, yeah, it was no, my second time in Spokane, but my first time working him. That was a really special match to me. Just because it was one of the first really like spot filled, like really good matches I felt like I had. Then there's one with a guy named Shane McLean, which is the first night they ever wore the Forever Face to the ring. It was a chairs match. That was a solid match. And then as far as like anything else, probably got two from this last year. Uh, my first EPW match with Kindle Fire. Dude is incredible. One hell of a talent. He really, really, really did a lot to put me over and to solidify my spot here, in the Midwest and my introduction. And then my last match I had with the Bud Light Brawler Dalton Davis. That's another really good one. That was probably my best match of last year. And also, the reason it stands out to me is because I felt like I was being put on another level than to what I've been on before. Like being in Washington, I was always working the same promotion, to be honest, for almost 10 years. Um, I worked the same promotion all the time, a lot of the same people. So coming out here, having a fresh start, everything like you see in the Midwest, wrestling here is incredible. There's so much incredible talent, and I felt like, okay, I've got to step my game up, and to hang with my homie Dalton, um, just to be able to have a good match with him on the level I did, that really stood out to me because it was like, okay, I'm really accomplishing something now. Like I've got worth, and I can hang with the best of them. So those would be like definitely the few that really stand out to me.
Gotcha. Well, if you know me, you know I mean what I say and I say what I mean. And I meant it when I said you were one of my favorite people that I've met since I've been working for Zool. Man, you're one of the few people that I could just walk up to and give a big hug because I know you're not going to give me any fucking problems the entire day. It's
Yeah,
going to be
no, not at
smooth
all.
sailing. You are an absolute pro. I love sitting on the side of the stage and watching you do your impressions. I got a chance to see you work for the first time at the video shoot over the fall. Man, it was a lot of fun. I dig what you're doing, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here. Not only because we have become friends through these shows, but at the same time, I think somebody's got to put a spotlight on the people that are doing it that you might not see, but when you do see, you might love them. So I really hope nothing. I hope 2024 is nothing but the best for you, bro. I'm always excited to know that you're coming because again, you do such a great job at these little shows, and man, I couldn't ask for somebody as professional and easy to work with as you. So thank you very much, my dog. And as normal, I'm going to go ahead and give these last couple of minutes to you. If there's anything in particular you would like to plug, floor is yours.
Um, the only thing I really want to plug is I'm all over social media. There's multiple ways you can find me. Yeah, if anyone's like, man, I don't know how to find you, well, then you must be sleeping under a rock because I'm everywhere. Any social media platform, all you gotta do is look up the Face Collector or the Face Collector JS. Um, just look for Jared Savage and you will find me. I will say you might find the basketball player. I guess there's a basketball player out there. That's not me. I can't shoot hoops. I can do it on VR, but that's about it. But you can find me anywhere. Um, if you follow my YouTube, I have all my matches, as well as many of them as I can up to date. I have them all on there. So there's no excuse why, no one, someone couldn't see my work. I've got merch. I'm heavily on my merch game. So if you go to my pro wrestling tees or you go to my Brainbuster tees accounts, you can find plenty of different shit, a plethora of items from shirts to hats to backpacks, Letterman jackets, hoodies. I've got it all pretty much on there. Um, and I'm always, for any promoters who happen to hear this, I'm always accepting bookings, always. And I'm always willing to travel. So if someone wants me at their promotion, I mean, if any fans want me at a local promotion, all you got to do is just make some noise about it. Tag me on the comments of stuff. Let people know that you want me there at your show or your local promotion, and if we can make it happen, I'll be there because I'm busting my ass. I'm really working my ass off to get something going right now, and this last year has proved that I'm picking up momentum. So get at me while the price is right, get at me while I'm still out here, on this level. Because I truly believe that if I just keep putting in this work and I keep busting my ass, I will get to that next level because I've already proved to myself and other people that I can get to a different level than I was on originally. So it's only up from here.
I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you for being on today, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, bro. I fucking appreciate you, and just keep killing it, man, because this show right here, there's something special going on. If y'all ain't fucking with the Rose Show, then you're fucking up.
You heard the man himself. All right. We'll see you guys next time.